Parent as therapist. This is a role we are finding ourselves in frequently, especially in the time of COVID-19. My name is Amber Millan, and I'm a speech-language pathologist. And I'm going to share with you some strategies to help you support your child develop functional communication skills through parent or caregiver guided therapy at home. So a bit about me. First of all, hello to stars. I just relocated from Switzerland to California last year, and I'm missing Switzerland. And I appreciate Irina's invitation to share with you today. I am a mother to an 11-year-old boy with autism, attention deficit disorder, global dyspraxia, and hypotonia. I am also a certified speech-language pathologist through the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. As a mom and therapist, I understand how challenging it can be to meet our children's needs, especially during COVID. This presentation is designed to give you some tools, and for some of you to help review some tools, to help you feel empowered to do what you're already doing and to do it more effectively. These strategies are for you as much as they are for your child. These strategies I'm going to share apply to all ages, and they are complementary to any formal therapy program, in person or through telehealth or Zoom, that you may already have in place. This brief presentation focuses on strategies, again, that are emphasizing functional verbal communication. So this presentation does not directly address articulation, motor speech disorders, or written language. However, links to additional resources for various ages and specific communication disorders are included at the end. So whether you have a nonverbal or minimally verbal 5-year-old, or you have a teenager with autism spectrum disorder who needs support with social communication, I hope that you will find some useful ideas. So again, these strategies are for parents and caregivers, and for simplicity, I will say parent throughout this presentation. These strategies are what we as parents will do to support our child's communication. So you may be wondering, well, how can I be the therapist? Have confidence, you are uniquely qualified. So you are already experts on your child. You spend more time with your child than any specialist. You understand your child's needs, their wants, their interests, which is everything important for why a child would want to communicate. They want to communicate about their needs, their wants, and their interests. You have an instinct for and firsthand experience of what your child's abilities are and also their communication challenges. You know your child's daily routine, and you provide the holistic environment. This is one bullet point, but this is a huge aspect. You know, Irina is a specialist in nutrition. We know how important nutritional status is to the foundational skills of a child being able to be awake, present, attentive. There's also the sensory needs that a child has. Sensory diet is a term used by occupational therapists, and that is basically what sensory needs a child has and activities that can be done throughout the day to meet those needs. For example, a child may need to have heavy physical activity like jumping or running that they do in the morning before they sit down to try to do academic work, because they need to have that exertion before their mind can focus. It also might mean that in the environment of your home, you have different equipment that could help with sensory needs, or also motor needs. For example, my son needs a compression vest. This gives him sensory input and proprioceptive input, vestibular input, and it really helps his posture. He also needs a special chair with a cushion and a footstool. And when he has these things, he's much more able to participate and communicate over his Zoom classes during COVID shelter in place. And without these supports, and he needs them in the classroom too, without these supports, he's too distracted by what his body is doing to be able to effectively communicate. Also, parents, particularly for younger children, we shape our child's sleep schedule. We know about what time they should aim to go to bed. We help with the good night routine, brushing teeth. We help with story time, the things that will relax the child to get them to sleep at a certain time. We also help with home organization. By default, we're always doing this, but home organization is part of the strategy of creating opportunities. So I'll touch on this later, but the way the home is organized, or more specifically and importantly, the child's things, the way those are organized can either create opportunities to communicate or possibly limit opportunities to communicate. So, okay, you may be wondering, all right, so I'm uniquely qualified, but how do I do speech therapy at home? Well, before we talk about how you do it and the strategies for how you do it, let's identify what is the goal for your child. I want you to think about your priority for your child. What do you think would make their life easier if they had the communication skills to do it? That's where you want to start. So let's walk through an exercise together. Let's choose 1 or 2 goals for your child. So you might want to pause this after step 2, but let's walk through this. Step number 1, you're going to take a moment to think about what you wish was easier for your child to do when they communicate. And by that, what gesture? Are they using pointing? Could they use more vocabulary? Do they need vocabulary to do the language function of requesting? Do they need help asking or learning to ask? Or do they need more skills for social conversation to do back and forth because they need to make friends, or they need to talk to family members on the phone, or even be able to call to make an emergency phone call? So what is a priority? What do you see as a priority for your child in terms of a communication skill to get them to the next level? If your child has been receiving formal therapy, you could choose one of those goals. So think now what you wish your child could do. Step 2 is to write these ideas down. Whatever comes to mind, it could be 4 or 5 areas. The hard part of step 2 is once you get the 4 or 5 areas written down, you now need to narrow it down to 1 and no more than 2 goal areas. This is really key because you need to be able to get specific and at a granular level. You know, like grains of sand or grains of sugar. You really need to get clear, like what is the nitty-gritty goal that you're going to work on. The clearer you can be, then the simpler it's going to be for you to actually do it at home, to work on the skill at home. Some examples. Parents, when they bring their children in for therapy, often say, oh, I wish my child could talk. Well, a starting point would be, I wish my child could use words, you know, to ask for things, to make requests, instead of just grabbing objects. Some children will grab your hand to have you grab an object. So that would be a need for language, words to make requests. Another example, I wish my child would stop interrupting. Well, more specifically, and this comes from my home life, I wish my son would stop talking over everyone else during dinner. It's a huge priority for us right now. I want him to develop the skill to notice when other people are talking so that he waits and then adds his comment or question in that pause. And that would avoid all the interruptions. Another skill for a teenager might be, I wish they had better conversation skills. That's general. Specific, I wish my child could ask questions when talking to friends and family on the phone, like asking questions about their life. Because right now my child just starts talking about their particular interest, their movie, their gaming, their drone, their soccer team. It's just all about them. Once you've isolated, just one area that really stands out to you as a priority, and if you have several, just pick one that stands out as a priority. And step 3 is you want to set this as a goal, but set it as your own goal, because the goal is that you will model this skill, this communication ability, this communication function. You're going to model this skill for 2 to 3 months. Once your child begins to show that they can use this skill, it might be using more vocabulary, it might be asking questions instead of grabbing. It's not that they've learned to say one word, it's that they've learned to develop use a function repeatedly. Once they show that they've developed a skill, then you're going to think, well, they seem to have gotten this. What's the priority now? And then you're going to repeat these steps. 2 to 3 months is a good window in which to see change. Maybe your child will show change sooner, but allow for 2 to 3 months. And then repeat these steps. So, now that you've identified the what, how will you get there? And that's where the parent-guided strategies, the strategies for parent-guided therapy come in. You're going to learn to model a skill when there is natural motivation, embed your models in your daily routine, and you're going to learn to pause, observe, and praise. Strategy number 1, modeling a skill when there's natural motivation. So the best time to work on communication skills is when a child is motivated to communicate. So we need to look for motivation. When and what motivates them? And as parents, you are already experts in this area. So let's look at motivation in a child's life. Children are motivated to get help. They're motivated to eat. And they'll motivated to let you know, whatever way, what they want to eat, what they don't. They're motivated to play with preferred toys, to play on a screen or watch TV, go outside, go swimming, go to a restaurant. Maybe find their clothes, to tell you about their favorite object. Or they might be motivated about a subject or to share about an experience. Like I said, to show you things. Also importantly, children are motivated to avoid, and we need to give them language and vocabulary and communication skills for the functions of avoiding or refusing or complaining, rejecting. That might look like a tantrum because they don't have the language or communication skills to use a statement like not today, no want, or I don't want. Okay, so there are many different functions, and motivation is key. I'll give you a personal example about using motivation. Pardon me. My son loves to walk our new puppy. We have a puppy, and to walk the dog, my son needs to put on his shoes. His favorite pair of shoes have shoe laces, and my son cannot tie shoelaces. So he needs help to do this. And often he'll go get his shoes and sit on the bench and do nothing except play with his shoes. And so the skill we're working on is for him to ask for help. Now, I know he can't tie those shoes, and there are other shoes he could choose, but he prefers these shoes. So I know he needs my help, and I could easily walk up to him and just automatically tie his shoes. But there's a breakdown here. He's not asking for help when he needs it. He's not asking spontaneously. So we need to build that skill. So I walk up to him, I notice that he's not tying his shoes, and I say, "Do you need help?" He says, "Yes." But that's where it stops. So I give him the exact language. I model the exact question he can ask me. I say, ask me for help. You can say, "Mom, can you help me tie my shoes?" And then he'll say, "Mom, can you help me tie my shoes?" And then we finish up and head out the door. And he gets the natural consequence of, okay, we did that, and the objective is met. We get to go outside. Now, since we've been doing that, now he says, "Mom, can you help me?" I don't need to tell him to ask me. He's now getting more spontaneous with asking me for help. And because we walk the dog every day, he's practicing this function of requesting help every day. And it's getting more and more spontaneous for him. So you'll notice, though, part of the advantage is that we're doing something that's in the daily routine. He's motivated to walk the dog, and that repeats every day. So that's when the second strategy comes into play. Embed your models in your daily routine. Now, what is so special about the daily routine? The daily routine is very important because you're already doing it. You don't have to create a block of time. You don't have to set aside an hour or drive to a therapist's office. You might be doing that in addition, but the daily routine is just already happening. So parents, you can choose which 5 to 10-minute routine you want to use for modeling, depending on which skills you need to practice and when you know that those are going to come up for your child. The modeling that you're doing is happening in authentic and meaningful interactions. And that's really going to help carry over of skills, which is different than, say, a therapist creating scenarios in the therapy room to try to imitate real life. You're actually modeling communication during real scenarios, during real interactions. And there are hundreds of opportunities built into every day. Routines require the use of many different communication functions. If children wake up, they request attention. They request objects. They need to request food, or they want to comment on what food they want or don't want. So there's labeling, there's vocabulary, there's the function of commenting, requesting help, agreeing or disagreeing, sharing an emotion. Are they using emotion words to say how they feel? I'm disappointed, I don't want that. That makes me feel sad. Rejecting, no thanks, not now, please don't, or avoiding. part of rejecting. The other thing about a daily routine is that, and this is so powerful, it offers opportunities for distributed practice. So think about it like going to the gym. You can go to the gym once a week and have a really intense workout, and that's great. But as most of us know, we get better results for our health when we're exercising, 4 to 5 times a week. And speech and language practice, communication practice is no different. A speech language therapist can see your child once, twice a week, maybe more, but that would be less common. And when they do, in the 30 minutes or hour-long session that they have, they can model skills really effectively, and many of them, maybe 50 repetitions or 100 repetitions of a skill. That's great. That's what we aim to do. You as a parent, though, see your child every day, and you can model these same skills every day. And this builds momentum for a child to integrate those skills in an authentic way into their own day-to-day experiences. So we want to use the daily routine, and we need to model by choosing parts of that daily routine where we're going to be effective. So let's take a look at some examples of embedding skills in a daily routine. Now I know the slide is very full, so I'm going to walk you through it. So the top row, example 1, a goal might be, I want my preschool age child to start telling me or asking me for what she wants using 1 to 2 words, because right now she's grabbing and pointing. So what you can do as a parent is you can say, a great time for me to teach vocabulary that's convenient for my schedule because I don't have to go to work yet would be breakfast. I'm at home for breakfast and we have breakfast together. That's when I can model some vocabulary. And a great way to do that is by offering kids choices. So say you pick breakfast as your daily routine for teaching vocabulary because you want to help your child learn to request. So what you can begin with is the options that your child has. Show options for your child to see. Do you want milk or do you want orange juice? Do you want toast or do you want cereal? And I do recommend that when you're offering choices, you pull them up towards your face. The children will be interested in the object and their attention will move up with the object to your face. They'll recognize you as a communication partner. They'll see the eye contact. So it's a very rich visual model. And why offering choices helps is that, again, it builds vocabulary. The child has to process language. So they're working on the receptive language skills. They're hearing the articulation, the phonology, the linguistic aspects, and they're required to express themselves. Even if just by pointing at one of the 2 choices, they're still actively engaging in processing and, using language towards an end. And over time, the idea is that they'd start to initiate the verbal, okay? And adults can help this by using expectant facial expressions. So I'm gonna lift my glasses. Big eyes, you lean forward, you look expectantly, waiting for them to communicate back. Key here is that you need to create the need for the child to ask. So often we know what our kids need for breakfast, and maybe we're in a rush to get to work, so you just fix breakfast, you put it on the table. Aha! This is where you might need to tweak your routine slightly. It does add a few seconds or a few minutes, because what you can do might take more time to get out several choices, but you create the need for the child to make a choice. You can also put limited quantities of their favorite drink or snack out. Then they're going to be motivated to ask for more. Another way to create the need for a child to ask or communicate is to put a preferred toy or object slightly out of reach. They might be able to see it, but they can't get it, and they're going to need your help. So you can work on labeling the objects. You can work on making the request. The request can be, I want the object. Can I have the object? Mommy, get the object. You can work on many different ways to increase communication. Another way for parents to create the need for a child to ask is to forget the obvious on purpose. And kids think this is so funny because they really think you've forgotten. So your child will notice your mistake. For example, if you give them a toothbrush with no toothpaste, they're going to be like, Mom, that's what happened. They're going to notice if you do something different. Or if you give them an empty cup, oh, Mommy's so silly, Papa's so silly, this is empty, right? So it gives you a lot of opportunity to also label things. Oh, empty cup, do you want more juice? Do something silly. Forgetting really gets the kids' attention. Importantly, adults need to also notice if they're limiting the need for the child to ask by overhelping and filling in the gaps. And I'll mention that again later. Example number 2 is for an older child. I want my school-age child to increase their social initiation. So he needs to learn to start and maintain conversations at least for 1 to 2 turns. Because, right now, we call grandma or grandpa on the phone, he says hi, and then he jumps right into talking about his favorite thing and never asks any questions to the other person. And so it's very hard for friends and family to feel like they're having a quality conversation. So in this case, you as the parent, you're going to want to coach social scripts. And a great time in the daily routine are actually the transitions that occur between scheduled activities. So older children, they can get breakfast, they can get dressed on their own, they've got classes, but the time you might have with them to work on their more sophisticated communication needs would be possibly when you're in the car together, coming home from soccer practice, or you're driving them to an appointment. So one thing I've done with my son, and it's kind of an example I've mentioned here, is, at pickup from school, I say, well, before you can play Minecraft, I'd like you to tell me 3 things about your day. So he'll tell me 3 things about his day. He's gotten pretty good at that. And then I coach him and I say, well, now ask me about my day. And sometimes you might need to give the child the actual question, which is, Mom, what did you do today? Or Dad, how was your day? Okay. Then allow the child to repeat the script, to repeat the exact model. And then after they answer, or after you answer the question they gave you, then you can coach them on what to say next. Now, this might seem a little robotic at first or a little artificial, but scripts are a great way to bridge more automatic and spontaneous speech for kids who just don't know what to say next. So if they're having some social communication challenges, they can use this kind of as a script and practice with you. And if you have soccer practice 3 times a week, then they're getting that practice 3 times a week. With my son, school is every day. He knows that every day we're going to practice conversation skills in the car on the way home. And after he does that, he knows that he's going to get a few minutes of Minecraft. Fortunately, our drive home isn't too long, so it's pretty equal between conversation skills and, Minecraft time. So those are examples of parents embedding goals into a daily routine. But you know what? I bet I can guess what you're thinking. Now, I'm busy. I have a limited amount of time. I feel like I can't add one more thing. So how do I do this? So let's do an exercise together. Let's quickly take a look at some examples of an action plan, and then you're going to pause the slide deck and write your own action plan. You'll see immediately that these are very simple action plans. There's nothing fancy here because, again, the idea is to keep it as simple as possible. Let's make it easy on you as a parent. If it's not easy, you're not going to be able to follow through and do it. So, example number 1, I will model names of food or objects at least 3 times in a day. Okay, and I'm going to do this during breakfast, or maybe you choose snack time or playtime with Legos. And the consequence is that my child is going to get the object that they name. So if they ask for milk, they're going to get milk, even if they wanted orange juice, right? You're like, it's going to be a built-in consequence. Now you can switch it out, but the idea is that they see that there's a direct connection between what they communicate and what happens next. Action plan example number 2. I will model a skill at least 3 times in a day. I will model to my child how to ask questions to start a conversation and keep it going. And I can do this on the drive home from soccer practice. And the natural consequence is either the child and I, my child and I, really enjoy the conversation, or they're motivated to have the conversation practice because then they know they get Minecraft or something else or their preferred snack when they get home. Now it's your turn. What is your action plan? So you're going to write down the skill you're going to model that you can do 3 times a day. You might be able to model it 3 times in a minute, but allow yourself 5 or 10 minutes associated to a specific routine. Choose one routine, but then I put some extra lines because maybe there are some alternate times during the day that you can think it might also be possible to practice that skill. And then identify, hey, what's the consequence? What's the motivation for my child to participate in this? What are they going to get next or get out of it? Maybe it's food, an activity, praise, time with screen, could be hugs or cuddles. Maybe they're just going to feel successful and that's their motivation. I encourage parents to think about using a first then approach, like first I model and then there's a consequence. Just that structurally keeps it easy. Like first I do this, then this happens. That can also be something you say to your child. First, we're going to practice conversation skills, then you can have the iPad. Remember that distributed practice is powerful. And then remember to adapt to your child's frustration level. And if they're showing frustration after the first attempt or 2, just gauge it. If they're really melting down, just ease off and try it another time. But if you feel like they can push through, and that's how you know your child, then maybe try it again. Just be sensitive to that. Now, I'm going to move this little video here. That's what you can plan to do. As we know, life doesn't always go as planned. Particularly 2020 is a year that has not gone as planned. So just a word about how embedded practice looks in real life. As a parent, I can tell you it looks messy. So it's going to feel really awkward and difficult. And I know we all know this presentation, okay, it sounds simple, but then we get to doing something in real life, adding it to our busy lives, and it's going to feel difficult and awkward. So you're going to make a plan to model. Maybe you make it for tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, and then you're going to forget. You're going to get distracted and forget. That's normal. Just tell yourself that you'll try it again later. Your child may not respond, and you will wonder at some point, what's the point of this? Don't give up. Remember, this is not about them immediately showing you the skill. This is about you being really good at modeling and being consistent about modeling. Another point is that your child is very likely, going to show some frustration that you are making things more difficult. Especially if you've maybe created situations where you've just provided things without them having to communicate, and now you're not, and you're requiring them to communicate. This could really up their level of frustration temporarily until they adapt to your new expectations. So don't give up. It is working. Now, how will you know it's working? Well, you will begin to notice in yourself that you are automatically modeling throughout the day. You will start to anticipate all the opportunities available in a day. You'll realize, oh, I could practice then, or then, or then, or during that activity. You are going to notice that your child is trying to communicate in new ways after your models. At some point, you'll start to see a change. My favorite is that your child will probably surprise you with a new skill, and it will catch you off guard. And you'll think, aha, it's like an aha moment. And I encourage parents to keep track of that. You could email yourself, oh, my child said 2 words today, or my child spontaneously asked me for help with math. Keep track of what they did. This is very, very helpful for 2 reasons. One, you can go back and really recognize the progress that's happened over time. And 2, when you meet with your therapist or your child's pediatrician, you have a record of how the child has changed over time, because often we go blank. Well, what's new? These are actual examples that show the way their skills and functional communication has changed over time. Another way that you'll know if it's working is that grandparents or other familiar people, maybe a neighbor, will comment on changes. It's like when our children grow taller, we see them every day, we don't notice it, but then grandma or grandpa see the child and really think, wow, they've changed so much. So other people's observations are also important to know if changes are happening. The other thing realistically is that you may not know that it's working. The skill you've chosen to work on, you may not see changes in the 2-month window you've set. That doesn't mean it's not working. It could be that particular skill is going to take more time for your child. So one additional way we're going to know or support the idea that the goal stays on track is by looking at strategy 3. Pause, observe, praise. So this 3rd strategy is really about in the moment. Strategy 1, modeling when there's natural motivation, and strategy number 2, which is using the daily routine. Those are how parents set it up. We set up the opportunities, and it's what we're doing in preparation. We know what we're going to model, and we organize the moment to do it. And then in the moment, when the child is communicating, that's when we need to pause, observe, and praise. First, pause. This is really more important than I think most of us can even keep track of. Allowing for silence and extra time to process and respond. Our children need time. When a child is quiet or does not respond right away, too often adults fill in the silence. They talk for the child, or they repeat their question over and over, sometimes in different ways, as if that will stimulate the child to respond. For some children, and this is the case for my own son, it's like reloading a page and starting from scratch, as if you push, upload again on your computer and you're watching the rainbow wheel spin. In this case, the child doesn't have an opportunity or needs more time. And over time, they may come to expect that the adult is just going to talk for them. And they may just feel discouraged to even try to communicate, because they know they can't, get there fast enough, and somebody's just going to take their turn or talk for them, and they might lose their motivation. So really allow for silence or extra processing time and response time. The next aspect in the moment of communication is of observation in two ways. First, you want to observe your child. Recognize what your child can already do well to communicate. And a great thing about observation, or a great tips about observation, can be found at the website hannon.org out of Canada. Tips on observation, waiting, and listening in the communication moment. So I can refer you to that. The other thing is you want to observe yourself. Again, in the moment, or in the moment of your daily routine, are you creating or limiting the opportunities, right? Are you stepping in too soon? Are you making a situation easier for your child? Zooming out, do you lay out your child's clothes? Do you prepare and set out their breakfast? Or do they have to ask for juice? Can they access their iPad anytime they want? Or do they verbally need to request to use it or to request the code? So there are many ways I'm over helping my child right now, but we have to decide at any point in time where we're going to really emphasize and encourage the communication, and maybe different areas in their life where, yeah, we're still helping them because this is difficult, or I need to get out the door for work. But just notice and be accountable if you're creating or limiting those opportunities. Start to notice that. Because parents can set situations up, including organizing the home environment, so that the child has more need to initiate communication. And like I said earlier, this can really create some frustration for a child. So parents must be very attentive and adapt to the child's frustration level. Again, do not expect perfect communication after your models. Just reward the attempts. If you see your child trying to imitate your model or a version of your model, or they say a sound, they're really trying to do something different, reward that. And when we think of reward, think of praising your child very specifically. It's like an immediate feedback. Give specific praise. It can't be a general good job or I like your talking. Be more specific so a child knows exactly what they said or did so that they can repeat that. For example, a preschooler, you could say, I like how you pointed at the orange juice, or I like how you said the D in dog. And even as you're praising them, they're hearing the word again, they're hearing the phonology, they're watching you say it. You can say, I like how you said the word cat. Again, they're hearing the vocabulary. A school-age child, that was a big sentence. Good job telling me the whole idea. And that's when you're encouraging a child to notice that, they've really got a concept and they're fully expressing it. Maybe they're retelling a story and they did a good job telling the whole idea. Or I like how you describe the butterfly as elegant and graceful. That's a great use of vocabulary. For an older child, You could say, thank you for waiting to talk until after I finished, my sentence. Or you did a great job asking grandma about her recent trip. We'd all like a trip now, I'm sure. Or I like how you asked me, can I tell you about my new video game? And you noticed that I was on the computer, so you waited, okay, for me to answer. That was a really good observation. So these are examples of ways that in the moment we can use a strategy of pausing, observing, and praising to really give that immediate feedback so a child knows what they can continue to do that's progressing their communication skills. Sorry, helping them to progress in their communication skills. A few final tips. Communication is so much more than talking. We know this, it's just important to remember all the time when we're working with our kids, because our expectations so often can be, I want my child to talk, but let's look at them holistically. How are they communicating and expressing themselves? Let's look at their body language, their eye contact, their intention, their pointing. Which functions can they use? And really look at which functions they need. Get attention, by bringing objects and choices up to your face, if that's where your child is at, where they're not making eye contact or still learning to label objects. Avoid asking questions that only require a yes or no answer. Open-ended questions or choices really encourage more use of communication skills. Now, if your child has dyspraxia, also known as childhood apraxia of speech, and they struggle motorically to repeat your models are still very important over time, because your models are reinforcing the visual, the motoric, and the linguistic components of speech and language. And this is all necessary for their development. At the end, you can see more resources specific to motor speech aspects. This is important to note. Many children with autism have, at the same time, struggle with motor speech issues. And so if you are concerned that your child's not talking yet, that's important to have that looked at by a speech language pathologist. Childhood apraxia of speech. Remember that the results of your efforts, the modeling, it's not going to be immediate. Once in a while, you might say, "Ooh, there's an immediate, imitation or attempt." But overall, that idea that something's become automatic or spontaneous, you're probably not going to see an immediate change. And growth or progress is not linear. My son will show a skill, and the next day he won't demonstrate it. Then 2 weeks from now, or 2 weeks later, he'll demonstrate it again. So it's this idea of forward, back, forward, back. But over time, we do move forward. Have self-compassion. We all know that helping our children is a marathon, not a sprint. And this presentation, as a parent to you parents, keep expectations very clear and really start simple. Simple, 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 so that you can stay consistent and effective. Once you've gotten the hang of it, you can add more goals in using the same process. So there you are. You've got 3 strategies: modeling a skill when there is natural motivation, embedding your models in your family's daily routine, and you can switch it up. And then in the moment, noticing and observing how you're going to pause, observe what your child is doing and where they need help, and what you're doing, and praising them using very specific feedback. This concludes the presentation on 3 strategies for parent-guided therapy. It's been a pleasure to share these strategies with you and a few of my experiences. There are resources mentioned after this slide. And thanks again to STARS for inviting me. And I wish you good luck and the best of health.